On this episode of the DTVC podcast, Sean Malloy from I Must Break This podcast is on, and we are talking about We Die Young, Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. So stay tuned for that. Now, you're probably listening to my voice here. I did lose my voice over the weekend. It is slowly coming back, so that's why everything has been behind. So we're kind of just trying to catch everything up as we go here. So this is going to be a short, cold open as well. We've got some recording to do before we have next week's episodes, but and then, yes, and so in terms of YouTube channel, we're gonna take a little break on that till I get my voice back ready for that. On the site, we'll look at doing Jade this weekend, so look out for the Jade review that'll be coming up. Then another big announcement: we started a Substack, so the link for the Substack is going to be here in the podcast description. So I think I'm gonna save my voice from here. It's gonna be a quick one. This is a shorter episode anyway. With Sean and I, we had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we got a good conversation about the film in. Why don't we have John playing our theme song, and when we come back, Sean Malloy and I are going to be talking about We Die Young. Also, Boyd Out, I recorded this one before I lost my voice, so I have my full voice for this episode. Hey everyone, welcome back to the DTVC podcast. As always, this is Matt here, and I'm joined once again by special guest. We've got Sean Malloy from I Must Break This podcast, ready to talk some more Van Damme. Welcome back, Sean.
You know, it's funny, after I Must Break This podcast closed up, I thought, well, maybe I could start a Jean-Claude Van Damme podcast retrospective, but in a way I get to kind of live vicariously through your podcast and do it that way. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a lot of fun, and people are enjoying these episodes, so I think it works out really well. And after the last time you were on, when we talked about In Hell, there were a lot of places where you think about going with this episode. But then when I messaged you about coming back on, you're like, "Well, I'm watching We Die Young," and I'm like, "Well, I'd been intending to watch that one for a while. I mean, it's been on all kinds of streamers for a while, and I was like, why don't we just take advantage of the fact that you're already watching it? I'll watch it too, and we'll discuss that one."
Yeah, definitely. It was on one of the Roku channels. I don't know if you're familiar, if you have a Roku TV or not, but there's a plethora of channels on the Roku channels, and many of the channels are actually owned by Lionsgate, or they play nothing but Lionsgate movies. Okay, so there's Movie Sphere, there's a variety of them, but one of them, which has actually gotten pretty popular within the past year, is called 50 Cent Action. So it's, I guess it's owned by 50 Cent, I guess, but it plays nothing but action movies out of the Lionsgate library. And so the Expendables films, the two Rambo films are on there quite a bit. The London Has Fallen, Angel Has Fallen movies, pretty much any action film that has come out of Lionsgate within the past 12 years or so is on the 50 Cent channel. And so occasionally it's always kind of fun. I always kind of joke with my wife. I'm like, I can scroll through these Roku channels and I'm guaranteed to find at least a Van Damme movie or a Dolph Lundgren movie at any time of the day. And and sure enough, yeah, it was last week. We Die Young was on, which is probably one of the I'll just say it right now. I think it's probably the right angle and in Jean-Claude's entire filmography. Wouldn't you agree?
I would, for sure. It's a very interesting one. Now, what are your thoughts? Because there's not a lot of information on this, at least on IMDb, about this movie, but it feels almost like the director, was it Leor Weller? Let's see. I had his name here, and I just Leor Geller, not Weller. Leor Geller. It felt like he was planning to make one movie, and then found out he could get Van Damme and tried to split the difference. I guess I don't know if that was how you felt.
Yeah, it's weird. Because I think this is it's interesting how the big selling point for this movie is actually the one thing that I think kind of hurts it
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. And I think it's not to Jean-Claude's discredit at all. You know, I mean, I think you and I have kind of talked about this, but it seems like when it comes to, you know, back in the 80s and the 90s, whenever you would see a comedian suddenly trying his hand at drama, it was always a bit of a gamble. Some could pull it off and some could not. Okay. I think Robin Williams was able to kind of uh, uh, make the segue between both those genres. Tom Hanks has been able to do it. I remember when Jim Carrey was trying to do it, there was a lot of hesitation and trepidation, but I think for the most part, he was able to do it. Adam Sandler, depending on who you talk to, it's kind of difficult. But then you have those other ones like Chevy Chase. When Chevy Chase tried it, it just did not work. You know what I mean? And I think there's a number of other comedians. So that right there is always kind of tricky. But I will say, you know, I think action stars, you know, not even arguably have it more difficult than comedians in a lot of ways. Because I think when you're an action star, you know, your physicality is on display and everything like that. And so suddenly when an action star decides, you know, I want to do something out of the kind of steps out of the action genre, they almost have it. They have it more difficult than the average comedian. And I think this particular film is a perfect example of that. It has one foot still in the action door, but on the other hand, I think it's trying to be more of kind of like an urban thriller drama type thing. And then you have Jean-Claude Van Damme in there in the mix of this whole thing. And it's wild because, of course, I mean, he's the big reason why I watched this back in 2019 and why when it was on TV last week, why I watched it. But at the same time, you watch it and he really does stick out. Like I said earlier, how it's a right angle. He really is the outlier in this particular film that doesn't really fit. You know what I mean? It's almost like this film is a puzzle, and he's kind of that jagged edge that kind of sticks out. And I feel guilty saying that because I know that sounds awful to say. You know, I think any actor wants to try different genres and things like that, and kudos to him for doing it. But at the end of the day, for me at least, it just doesn't work. You know what I mean?
No, I totally agree because so you've got these two. So you know, maybe I'll give a quick synopsis for everybody just to give people a sense of what the story's about. You've got this main character Lucas, who is played by Elijah Rodriguez. He's 14 years old in Bulgaria. That's supposed to be Washington D.C., but doesn't look like any place in Washington D.C. But apparently, MS-13 has taken over a whole section of Washington D.C. and they just kind of run it as their own little fiefdom. And Lucas, he picks up collections and brings the money to the main kind of head guy in this area, Rincon, who's played by David Castaneda, who ends up breaking out right after this. I think he gets the umbrella. What is it called? The umbrella Academy, Umbrella Academy. He gets that like right after this. So he breaks out right after, but this time he's got, you know, full face of tattoos. You know, he's a real baddie. But anyway, Lucas finds out his younger brother is being joined in the gangs as well, and he's only 10. And Lucas wants to get him out. So while he's making a big delivery for Rincon, he finds out about his brother and tries to help his brother escape. And they end up falling afoul of the drug dealers. And how Van Damme gets involved in this, he's a former Afghan vet who buys heroin and Oxycontin or whatever off of Lucas. And so Lucas goes to him for help, and then, you know, there's kind of a big collision course to wackiness, I guess, at the end there. But yeah, to your point, like where this doesn't fit is that you've got this really compelling story going on with Lucas and Rincon. And Rincon's sister is getting married, but he can't leave his house because the feds are watching him. So he has the wedding at his house. So everybody's coming here to set up for this whole wedding, while Van Damme is, you know, having flashbacks to Vietnam, to Afghanistan and all of this stuff. And when he's brought into things, it's a very fascinating thing. Also, his character's mute, which is another an interesting factor. So it's like it almost feels weird when they bring him back.
Yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot of things I think that we can say that don't really fit in this particular film. And gosh, I don't know where where to start, because you just said a lot there, but I think we can get to the big elephant in the room, the fact that Jean-Claude is playing a mute in this film,
Yeah.
which, I think there's some good to be said about that, but there's also, some negative. On one hand, I think by playing a mute, he is able to kind of really tap into his acting. I don't know if you picked up on this or not, but I mean, I felt he was really channeling his character in Replicant when he played the clone.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Just this kind of, so, and I feel like, in my opinion, at least, I think Replicant is one of his best acting experiences. But yeah, it's interesting because, we can see that he's really reaching and he's really stretching as an actor by, playing a mute. But then on the other hand, if you want to look at Jean-Claude and where he was in terms of his career in 2019, I mean, look, you and I have said it on the show numerous times. I think around, 2009, 2010 or so, that's pretty much where he took a shift in his career. And I heard one person call him Sad Damme, where, it seemed like all of his roles, he was playing burnt out, he was playing tired, he was playing sad, depressed. And so his dialogue as a result was limited, if you will. So when you hear that, okay, when you see kind of the trend that was kind of going with many of his films and many of the roles that he was taking on, and then you see this particular film where he's playing a mute, it's kind of like, well, that checks out. That makes sense. You know what I mean? And I hate to say that because, look, I'll watch him in anything, but it's kind of, you almost kind of wonder, it's like, okay, wait a minute. Did he take on this role because he really, really wanted to stretch his acting chops and he really wanted to show people that he could act? Or did he take on this role because it was not even limited dialogue, Matt? This is no dialogue, right. Zero dialogue in the entire film. And so it's kind of like, I don't know. I kind of go both ways, but if I'm going to go with my gut on this one, I think it was the latter. I think one of the big enticing things with this one, I hate to say it, was the fact that it was zero dialogue, which made it easier for him at the end of the day to sign on. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and especially if you think about The Bouncer comes out the same year, and that's a movie that took a lot more out of him to make that movie. And so I wonder if that was part of the selling point too. 'Cause, I mean, Blackwater comes out the year before this, and that one is just like, for a movie that had Van Damme and Dolph in it, it was such an afterthought of a movie. And so I do wonder with this one, is it was like it probably had more to sell him personally than a Blackwater would. But then also, like you said, the fact that he didn't have to say anything. He's in Bulgaria, which I think The Bouncer was made in France, right? Or Belgium.
That was a French film, yeah, and that's
film.
very much a French film. It's subtitled and everything. I mean, it's very much a I don't want to say foreign film, but yeah, no, that is 100% a French production. This one, I mean, like you said, it's filmed in Bulgaria, but it's ostensibly set in Los Angeles. And I remember the promotion for this particular film, the trailer, had like some kind of rap music underscoring it, and then the font, that's on the poster and everything is kind of this old English, script, if you will. And so it's kind of like, okay, I see what they're going with, what they're going for. This is intriguing. This is cool. But then Jean-Claude Van Damme, I don't know if he really fits in that particular environment or that particular world. You know what I mean? And so you could also argue that maybe they made him mute because, okay, a soldier from Afghanistan who has a French accent. Okay, how do we explain that? You know what I mean? So I guess on that end, maybe they kind of write themselves out of that corner by doing that. But I don't know, man. I at the end of the day, I remember watching this for the first time, and I just kind of left it not so much confused and really not so much disappointed, but it almost felt like a weird fever dream in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? Like an alternate reality of a film that stars Jean-Claude Van Damme that is not really a Jean-Claude Van Damme film, if that makes sense in any way.
No, it totally makes sense. I mean, it's the kind of thing like, yeah, if like you fell asleep watching Van Damme movies, this would almost be a dream that you would have about Van Damme, right? It doesn't feel like a real movie in that sense. It's like you said, it's very fascinating that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most definitely, most definitely. And you could also argue too. I mean, look, we've talked about this as well with a lot of these guys. Is their face is on the poster front and center. They're the lead, but then they're gone for long stretches of the film, and a lot of that is because at the end of the day, I think they were only on set, so much of the shoot, and so yeah, you have this kind of this B story in the film, regarding the wedding or whatever that really almost seems at times to be taking, the focal point of everything else. And so it's kind of like, okay, what story is it they're trying to tell here? Luckily, I will say about this particular film, Matt, with these gripes aside, I feel at the end of the day, this film does feel like a complete movie. It doesn't feel ultra cheap. There's a really cool car chase in the film that actually is filmed really well. So I mean, it does feel like a complete movie, but like I said, it's this bizarre kind of right angle in his filmography. You know what I mean? It's kind of like Dolph Lundgren did that biblical wannabe epic movie called Final Inquiry that is just really weird seeing, Ivan Drago and He-Man in that particular film taking on a supporting role as this character named Brixus. You know what I mean? And so I feel like every actor kind of has that particular role. Sylvester Stallone did Spy Kids 3D. So I mean, they all have those particular films that kind of stick out, and you're like, what the hell is this here? But that's kind of how I felt about this one.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And one of the things you mentioned, because the movie actually takes place in it should have taken place in Los Angeles. It would have made sense to take place in Los Angeles, but it takes place in Washington, D.C. And I wonder if, 2019, this is sort of the end of the first Trump administration. And that was like, MS-13 was all over the news. It was essentially this idea that like, this whole, what we're now seeing with this huge ICE crackdown at that time, when he didn't really have the mandate under his first term, it was trying to propagandize that every immigrant is essentially MS-13, and that's why we have to, remove everybody from the country, that kind of thing. And setting it in DC almost, I think, plays into that a little bit more, because it would have made sense in LA. LA has a much, larger and much more established Latin American population. I mean, not that DC doesn't, but it kind of felt more like this, they're invading everywhere concept thing. And, all the characters were also undocumented. I think like Lucas's character is, and there's like a threat that he might get sent away or whatever. It was like kind of a whole part of it too. And it was almost like they're shoehorning that aspect in the movie, which they didn't need to do. I think it could have taken place in a fake version of Los Angeles just as easily. I mean, it looked dusty, right? It looked like, the desert. So they could have done that. And then shoehorning Van Damme in also felt weird. And then there was this weird Shakespearean construct that they were trying to shoehorn in that I thought was kind of clunky as well. And so you get all those pieces together. But like you said, there's not like boom mics everywhere. There's not like you said, it looks like it wasn't, it's not a lot of shortcuts were made in this movie. It looks like it was a complete movie, like you said.
No, it's competently made. It's very much competently made. And point of contrition, I mean, here I wrongly said, that this took place in the barrios of Los Angeles or whatever. No, you're right. This is in Washington, D.C., which, they dress up Bulgaria as best as they can for that. But yeah, it's yeah. I don't know, man. It's weird because it's, I feel like Jean-Claude has always played really well opposite children. So seeing him kind of take on this protector role over two Mexican-American boys, who are not even really teenagers. One's 10 and one's like 14 or whatever, I think was a really cool concept. And I mean, those two boys play it really well. You believe them as being brothers and everything, so I really liked that. But you almost kind of wonder, because they're trying so hard, they're bringing it, in their scenes, that you almost kind of wonder, oh gosh, I hate saying this, but if Jean-Claude's character is really even needed, to be honest, you know what I mean? Because I mean, like I said, there's such long stretches without him, that you'll almost kind of think like, well, maybe this would be more effective if it was about this 14-year-old trying to get his brother out of this, his 10-year-old brother out of this mess and everything like that. If maybe that might have been a more compelling story,
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you think of like Yeah, like it could have even played in more of like almost like an independent film way in that sense, where it could have been this like
Hmm.
dirtier, grittier thing. I mean, because there's certain aspects to the movie that I thought we're going to play a bigger part that don't. Like, David Castaneda's Rincon character. At the very beginning of the movie, they set him up as this really horrible figure, right? He's he there's a guy who's being dragged behind a motorcycle, and then he kills the guy, but he's like quoting Shakespeare, and it's like, oh, if he starts quoting Shakespeare, it's all over. He never quotes Shakespeare again the rest of the movie, just in that one part. But he's also never really that bad for the rest of the movie. He's nice to Lucas. He takes a shine to Lucas. He protects his girlfriend who's been attacked by one of the other gang members. He has a more thoughtful approach in a lot of cases to everything. He really cares for his sister, and so that kind of felt like an uneven piece too, because they're setting up this like ruthless, psychopathic gangster who we never really see for the rest of the film.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, we've talked about this before. Maybe that was the initial idea. They locked in the Bulgaria film location, and then they realized, hey, wait a minute, we have ties to Jean-Claude Van Damme. Okay, that would really sell in certain markets and territories. Okay, and then it's kind of like the pineapple analogy that I discussed when we talked about Alone in the Dark with Steven Seagal. You know what I mean? Like, okay, suddenly we gotta kind of rework this particular script in this particular story here to fit in this element that maybe doesn't work or fit in 100%. You know what I mean? But we're gonna try and make it work. And then that kind of goes along with my theory to where they say, okay, well, we can get Jean-Claude. Jean-Claude's only available for 10 days, and he's only willing to do so much dialogue. All right, screw it. Let's just make him a mute. Okay, we're gonna make him a war veteran who's a mute. You know what I mean? I don't know. I can't be certain and say that's exactly what happened, but I don't know. My gut is telling me that that could have been a possibility.
Well, because one of the producers was Moshe Diamant, who done
Exactly.
yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe the director gets a hold of Diamant and says, "Hey, I've got this movie." Diamant says, "Well, I can get Van Damme, and that will get us funding and distribution and all that." And it gets people like us watching and talking about it that we probably wouldn't have if it had been because I wonder if the original script called for maybe like a local fellow Latin American who's living in the area, maybe a guy of I think the characters were either Nicaraguan or El Salvadoran descent, but could have been similar. And he's the one who's helping him. Maybe originally Van Damme's character was supposed to be the older brother who went to Afghanistan, and instead when they get Van Damme, they're like, well, he's way too old to be their older brother, so we've got to kill the older brother off in the past, and maybe that was how they reworked it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility. You know what I mean? Well, and just the fact that, like I said, in that car chase sequence, it's not an amazing car chase sequence where the vehicles are careening down multiple roads or anything like that. I think it really only takes place on like really one street. But the fact that this MS-13 gang member shoots the 10-year-old boy's little dog,
right? Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think anybody who knows, like, if you really want to make your villain evil, killing an animal, especially a defenseless little dog, is one of the surefire ways to do it. So, and the fact that they go there, kind of shows, okay, they, we're really reaching for something.
Yeah. And I think also too, when the kids have been taken and they're at Rincon's place, kind of as the wedding's happening, he's got them in another room questioning them about trying to get the stuff back that he's supposed to have. And, Van Damme shows up and he starts taking out the baddies, but it's kind of this version of Van Damme that he's started using as he's gotten older, where he takes hits, he almost gets defeated, and he kind of outlasts his adversaries more than he is like just like Seagal going into a room just taking everybody out. Which I do appreciate that as well. That like this character is not supposed to be a one-man killing machine. He's more like someone who's just like a trained soldier who can help these kids out in some way.
100%. Yeah. And I think on that end, the film actually really works because, yeah, it doesn't make sense for Van Damme's character, who's also a drug addict, let's be perfectly frank and real, for him to be picking up a machine gun or a rocket launcher or anything like that. So him protecting these boys with the standard issue Glock pistol works to that end. You know what I mean? So it's not trying to do or be anything that it's not.
Yeah, and I think those kinds of things, like you said, those kinds of things work for it. And then like you said, there's that, like you said, it's the so to give people an idea, 'cause you should go back and listen to the Alone in the Dark episode where Sean and I talked about that movie, because your analogy on that one was that they were making a vampire movie. Oh, they've got Seagal, and so suddenly they just made this vampire movie with Seagal. It's essentially like if you hire a catering company, but they tell you you've got to put pineapple in every dish, and this isn't quite to that level, but to your point, it's like that this story that is already kind of uneven as it is, where it's got these elements of things like Shakespeare and stuff like that, to then then shoehorn Van Damme in as well. It's kind of an interesting mix.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I like the fact that they don't turn him into this complete badass.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like he is still vulnerable. You know what I mean? And he does have weaknesses and things like that. But it is funny because I do remember watching this back in 2019 when it first came out, and the scene where he is finally getting to speak, and you think that he's going to be saying some words, and then nothing comes out because his throat is so shot. It was always kind of like, wow, they couldn't even get him one word, could they?
Yeah, and it's funny because we're so used to with these low budget movies. It is such a crass concept of these characters. People not giving them any lines, or giving them as few lines as possible. Eric Roberts. How many locations is he going to shoot in? Which, I mean, that's another piece about this movie, is it's completely shot on a lot in Bulgaria. I wonder if Moshe Diamant. I wonder if they got the in Lionsgate. I guess because Lionsgate works with the New Millennium guys, I think, right? So they must have gotten their lot. This must be the New Millennium lot that they're using. But everything's, like you said, it's kind of on the cheap. I mean, a lot of the actors that are playing the Latin American gang members, they're UK actors that they brought in. Which is similar to the Seagal model, right? Where you fly in UK actors between projects and have them do some work in Bulgaria. Which a lot of them, they would do one movie with Seagal and that was it. They wouldn't do any more with him. But it's kind of a similar idea. And so there's that part of this movie as well. But it kind of, the whole thing, I was like, why did it need to even be that? Like, why did it need to be Latin American gangsters in DC? Why didn't it be Latin American gangsters, period? If you really only had a few people in the cast who actually were Latin American, and everybody else you had to get from Bulgaria. It's an interesting concept that, like, this guy wrote this script and it seems like everything was made around the script. And then when Van Damme comes in, everything's made around Van Damme as well.
Yeah. You bring up a good point too, because you almost wonder, like, okay, if they're working with a Bulgarian set, okay, and they have Jean-Claude involved in this, then yeah, why don't they just change it up and maybe make it, to where, because you everything you said is exactly correct. They could have made these two European teenagers who are, running afoul of some European gangsters. You know what I mean? They could have done something like that. And in the end, I think had they done that, maybe I don't think it would have been perfect, but I think it wouldn't stick out as the anomaly that it is. 100%.
Well, because think about, with Seagal and Van Damme too, how many of these movies that are made in Bulgaria where you get this whole Bulgarian stunt team and they all just play Russians and it's just Russian mobsters. And I mean, Russian gangs running neighborhoods in Bulgaria wouldn't be that far-fetched. And you could work that whole angle there as well. So yeah, I'm wondering if the director who also wrote the script, he had this idea in mind and they just tried to make everything around it. But then it, like you said, it's this right angle that just sort of sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's I think at the end, I keep saying this, but I think that's the big thing. Again, the big selling point for this particular film is also, what really hurts it and detracts from it. You know what I mean? I mean, and so yeah, it's kind of like I said earlier. Anytime you hire a comedian, you know what I mean, to do drama, it's a bit of a gamble, but it's I think even a more difficult gamble when it's an action star going against the grain and going outside of that. I've said this before, but Brandon Lee, when Brandon Lee passed away filming The Crow, there was all of this talk about how, Brandon Lee would have, man, if he hadn't died early, like he did, we would have seen him in some romantic comedies and some dramas and things like that. And it's like, well, on one hand, it's, that's an interesting thought and everything, but I got to be honest, if I was betting on that one, Matt, I think he would have been jockeying for the same roles that Jean-Claude and Steven Seagal ended up getting. And I think he probably would have slipped down into the direct-to-video path eventually as well as all of these guys did. And I know that sounds awful to say, and we'll never really know, but you know what I mean?
No, it's a perfect point because really it's what happened with all of them. I mean, obviously Schwarzenegger, he became governor instead of dropping down, right? He decided to go a different path, and Stallone did other things as well. But really that's where everybody was headed, that the movie industry had changed. And I get what people are trying to say, that like Brandon Lee had maybe like a Bruce Willis quality, but it wasn't even Bruce Willis at that point. It was like, I think especially when Bourne Identity comes out and they're like, oh, we can make Matt Damon into an action star. Well, then why are we making anybody into, why are we taking anybody with action skills? Why don't we just, get all of these other actors? And, then of course the Marvel movies come out and it's like, yeah, Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, these are our stars. And I think to your point, Brandon Lee, he probably would have had successes along the lines of Van Damme and Seagal, and he probably would have fallen into their category of DTV. I don't know if he would have slipped down to like that Gary Daniels, that next level, or some of the ones like we've talked about that Dolph did for a period that were just like really, really low budget, things like a Retrograde. I don't think he would have done that kind of stuff, or like Final Inquiry. But to your point, the idea that he would have been doing romantic comedies and stuff like that, it's like, no, I don't see him competing with a Matthew McConaughey. As charming as he was in Showdown in Little Tokyo, I wouldn't see him acting opposite Kate Hudson the way Matthew McConaughey did.
No, yeah, no, you're exactly right. And with The Crow, I know this isn't the Crow episode, but with The Crow, it's very interesting because that particular film was very dark and kind of dealt with, the macabre, and his character is this rock star who is actually killed. And so it was kind of this bizarre coincidence that he was actually killed. So I feel like with that particular film, the big reason why it became the hit that it was and that it is to this day is because it really was the perfect cauldron and maelstrom of events and elements and everything like that oddly kind of worked to its favor. You know what I mean? And I know that sounds very morbid to say that, but that's how I've always felt about that particular film.
Yeah, and I think it's something that Hollywood never takes enough into consideration with things. You think about Pulp Fiction was a similar situation. Pulp Fiction came at a time where people were getting a little tired of the big budget actioners and blockbusters, and they wanted something different. And here Tarantino gives them, Kevin Smith came at the same time with Clerks, and it was another similar hit like that. And then after Pulp Fiction comes out, and I'd say probably after Clerks too, everybody was trying to remake Pulp Fiction, right? Everybody was trying to remake Clerks. They were trying to remake these movies, but there was something special about them, both the movies themselves and the times that they came out. And I think The Crow is another one like that, Hollywood wants to kind of recreate the special sauce, but with movies, I was watching something recently about this upcoming merger between Warner Brothers and Netflix, and one of the people talking about it was saying how Hollywood's kind of algorithm proof. Like you don't know what's going to work and what isn't going to work, and part of it is because, like you said, there's these certain factors that come into play. I mean, we can think about with Van Damme's career too, that there's just certain movies that he had come out at the right time that kind of hit all the spots that you want for a movie like that. It's just always an interesting thing.
Yeah. No. I know we've kind of talked about the some of the negative aspects of the film. I certainly would not say that it is Van Damme's worst by any means. And I think even though the fact that he is playing mute and then he does not get a single line of dialogue, I think you do really care for him. I think he is able to emote actually pretty well, considering the limitations that he has. But man, I think I don't know. I mean, I guess I wasn't expecting splits or kicks from him, but maybe him speaking in his, famous Belgian accent might have been kind of cool. You know what I mean? But then again, I don't know if that would have worked with villains that are MS-13 gang members. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Well, I think one of the things we've talked about with Van Damme's choices when he dips into the direct to video world is that he was trying to choose things that were very different. I mean, I don't think, I think if Dolph did a character like this, it would be an offbeat kind of character that didn't speak in a Tarantino ripoff kind of movie, right? That he would be like an ensemble cast kind of thing. That's like how Dolph would do this role if he was going to get it. Seagal obviously would never touch it. Most action stars would never do anything like this. And I think that is the one thing about Van Damme is I think he would be intrigued by certain elements. And there's an earnestness in his performance where even though he doesn't have any lines and he's not in the movie a lot, there's also not like an Eric Roberts, like, I'm just going to sit behind this desk and talk on a phone and get a paycheck kind of approach either. There is an earnestness to the whole film, I think. And he is a part of that.
No, and I think we've said that on previous episodes. I think Jean-Claude's career going direct to video, I think, was inevitable. You know what I mean? It really was. But I feel like when he went direct to video, he really was able to really try new things that he wasn't able to do when he was a theatrical box office name. You know what I mean? And so, I mean, obviously I looked at this and the budget for this one was barely 4 million. So that's a far cry from what he was doing in the days of Time Cop and Sudden Death. You know what I mean? When he was at the height of his powers. But at the same time, I mean, man, if you just look at his CV of things that he did from 2002 onward, I mean, he really was, trying new characters and roles and genres and things like that. And maybe they all didn't work, I think, which we've kind of come to with this particular film, but it's still, it's still pretty interesting. And you can't knock him for trying something new. At the end of the day, maybe it's not what us fans really wanted from him, but then again, you know what I mean? He's also allowed to I guess do another food analogy. He's also allowed to go to a restaurant and try something new off the menu once in a while. You know what I mean? Like, and who cares if the fans are going to like it or not,
No, I agree there too. I think, but that's an interesting piece of this as well, because I think like, if he was doing this as a favor to Moshe Diamant as well. So if like he, on the one hand sees something in the character he likes and it's like, okay, I want to do this. But also he's saying like, okay, my friend who's produced a lot of great movies of mine, he's coming to me and asking me if I could play this part. Okay, I'll do that as well. So you've got those two elements there. But like you said, I wonder if that was part of it. So I wonder if Moshe comes to him and says, can you play this part? And he's like, yeah, okay. I mean, I don't know if maybe he had input. If they were like, okay, what if the character's mute? What if he can't speak? Like if that sold Van Damme on it more, that he was doing something different. Which I think that's another element about Van Damme that, like you said, his DTV stuff, the fact that making the character mute and maybe more challenging would have been a selling point to get him to do the role. Whereas, like again, like if it's Seagal, it's like, okay, here's your 30th ex-CIA guy who's going to come in and be the best that ever was, and all that kind of stuff. That Van Damme's like, no, I want to do something different again. I think it's definitely a cool thing.
And he's not sitting the entire time either.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Let's be perfectly frank. He's actually, getting down. I mean, you can tell there's some obvious stunt doubling, in some parts, but he's not sitting the entire time like some of his action compatriots have done. You know what I mean? I know this was a few more years down the line, but when Dolph did the film Section 8.
Right.
I mean, my God, I remember watching that one. And I mean, and that one, was, again, competently made and was okay. But every scene with Lundgren, he's either sitting down or he's lying down. I mean, we're to believe that he is this, that he is this soldier who's also been to Afghanistan and has been in battle. Well, his big battle scene, we see him laying on the ground wounded. And it's kind of like, come on, man. Like, I get that you can't do what you used to be able to do, but I mean...
Well, and I feel like Dolph, I mean, maybe he wouldn't have the range necessarily to do something like this either. But I mean, the one thing about Dolph that I've always appreciated is he's funny. He can play comedic kinds of things. And it is kind of too bad. I mean, I think of, Small Apartments, the character he plays in that. It's just a really fun character. So it's like he could go outside some of that stuff. But I wonder, too, if it's like same thing. It's like, I mean, I guess the other thing too with Dolph, especially as he's doing things like Section 8, he's getting big screen projects at the same time. He's getting Aquaman, he's getting Minions, he's getting all those things. So I wonder too if there's a point where he's just like he kind of compares his life on the set of Aquaman to the set of Section 8, and it's just like, yeah, okay, you got me lying down for this scene. That's the best you're gonna do.
Yeah, yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if again, I'm going to go back to it. I honestly do think that while the mute characteristic is indeed interesting, I do think that at the 11th hour, they realize, hey, we can get Jean-Claude Van Damme in this. Wait a minute, though, work around that and everything. And then Jean-Claude just said, well, hey, you're only getting me. You know what? Let's just make him a mute. I have to believe that was a last minute. It adds a layer to the film. It adds a layer and a little bit of a unique texture to the film. I will say that, but man, it really does stick out and is kind of this bizarre edge to the film that, I mean, it doesn't coalesce and fully come together. You know what I mean? Like I said, it feels like just kind of this weird fever dream that you kind of wonder, like, did that really exist? You know what I mean? Like, did I really just see that particular movie? You know what I mean? Like it, I don't know.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I don't think I'd put it on the same level as a Time Cop or a Sudden Death. But then again, those particular films were when he was in his prime, so it's not fair to compare those either.
No, I agree. Well, and I think another thing, just thinking about those movies he did in his prime, he was always, having these like love scenes that, it's like, as a kid, I remember like when I would rent a Van Damme movie and my mom would walk in, she'd be like, what did you rent? And it's like, okay, it's the Van Damme movie. This isn't like some erotic thriller or something like that. But here, there's a woman who's, I think she's younger. I don't know if she's, how much younger she is than him, but probably at least a good 15, probably years younger than him, who is in the neighborhood. I think her dad owns the mechanic shop that Van Damme's character works at. But she's falling for him. She's wants to be with him, and but it never goes anywhere beyond like her fixing his coat and things like that. Like there's never really, and I think that's another piece for Van Damme where it was like in the 90s he was just like, I got to do these steamy love scenes and I got to show off my body and how great I am. And to his credit, most of those guys like Seagal, when they would do love scenes, they were extremely awkward and it was really weird to watch. Whereas Van Damme was like, no, I'm going for it. But now he's like, you know what? No, I'm not going to have a love scene with the much younger woman in the movie. I'm going to, maybe we'll have like a romance or something like that, but it's not going that far. And I did kind of appreciate that.
Oh yeah, no, I 100% agree. Yeah, because you do think for a minute that maybe it might go there. And they don't even have a kiss, I don't believe. You know what I mean? Like, so I do really appreciate that. Again, I feel like the film kind of knows what it's playing with. It kind of knows the tools and the limitations that it has and everything. And it does work in that respect. It doesn't pull off anything that's completely ridiculous or unbelievable. You know what I mean? It's very much middle of the road in a lot of respects, but it could be a lot worse. You know what I mean? I mean, you and I spoke about Kill 'Em All. I would definitely say this is better than either of the Kill 'Em All films.
Right. Well, and I think that's another thing too that's interesting when you look at his filmography around this time, because again, we talked about The Bouncer, which is comes out the same year as this, but it is interesting how he's kind of like he's doing movies like this or like The Bouncer that take a little bit more from him, that are not, like you said, they're not just like Kill 'Em Alls or anything like that. But then, like you said, I mean, the Kill 'Em All just seems like your classic low budget DTV actioner. Blackwater's another one that just seems like a classic low budget DTV actioner. And so it's interesting that he has some of those movies. It's almost like those movies pay the bills. And then he can do these other movies where he can take a little bit more, which I think is a fascinating thing, because again, it's not how other actors on, that other DTV action actors are doing it. They're just like, line up all the projects that I can, I mean, I guess Scott Adkins is maybe a different one, but he's not from there, that 80s, 90s clique. He's younger, so he's kind of only been in the DTV world. But Scott Adkins is one who always likes to stretch himself as an actor and do different things. But for the most part, they don't. It's like, what can I, give me all the kill 'em alls. That's what I want. I want to do, can we bang out 3 kill 'em alls in a year? Whereas Van Damme's like, all right, I'll do a kill 'em all, and then I'll do, We Die Young. I'll do a Gardener, or Last Mercenary. He's still trying to keep things interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting we're talking about this now, because I don't think we've seen the last of Jean-Claude in terms of films. I think he pops up every now and again when he wants to, if he sees a project come his way. But have you seen Jean-Claude's latest business ventures?
No, I haven't. No.
Now that the film roles have kind of dried up, and to be honest, that entire market of low budget action films has kind of gone by the wayside. He's now kind of started some new business ventures. I don't know if you've seen them or not, but he's on Cameo. Are you familiar with Cameo?
Oh, okay. Yes, I didn't know. Yeah, I didn't know he was on, but
yeah. So he's on Cameo, where if you want him to send you a birthday message or whatever it may be, you're looking at spending almost $3,000.
Oh, jeez.
So, and then he started another one. If you go to the website, it's VanDammeTalk.com. That's his other venture, where you can schedule, where you don't have to. I think he's doing that so that he can kind of double dip, so that he doesn't have to share the profits with Cameo as well. He's doing this all 100%. But it's his website, VanDammeTalk.com, where if you want a 30-minute conversation with him, you're looking at almost $6,000.
Wow. So
I think that's how he's paying the bills now. And to be perfectly honest, it's probably much more profitable doing that than it is, being away for 5 to 7 days and filming a role with minimal dialogue or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I wonder too. Like, do you think like Dolph with his new vodka? Which one of those is more profitable? But it is amazing too that we've kind of seen this whole thing progress, right? Where we've seen, the direct-to-video action world and then the big budget action world kind of coexisting in the 90s together, and then the big budget world dips into the DTV world in the 2000s and almost cannibalizes the whole thing. And now with streaming and everything, we're seeing that it's just not profitable at all anymore. And it is interesting what it's going to look like in the future with, I mean, are there going to be enough movies to make someone like Van Damme interested in doing them? Or, I mean, Dolph is doing one with Isaac Florentine, I guess, in the near future. But, I mean, they have all these in production projects, but how many of them are ever going to get made? It's going to be interesting.
I'm guessing none.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's really sad because back in the early 2000s, you could always go on IMDb or whatever it may be, and they always had one project, usually about one a year, or one every other year, that they were working on, that you kind of had a new one to look forward to. That was one of my favorite things about Tuesdays was, going to Best Buy or Circuit City and buying the new DVD from either Van Damme or Dolph Lundgren. You know what I mean? Because you were guaranteed at least one new movie from them every year or every other year. And so what's very interesting is Van Damme, his output really started to slow way down, because I think he saw the writing on the wall in a lot of ways. And a lot of these productions he felt were beneath him and weren't, worth his time. And then if you look at a guy like Dolph, around 2011 or 2012 or so, he started putting out like 5 or 6 a year.
Right.
And I think he was doing that, one, to kind of capitalize on his image thanks to Expendables. But I think it was also because doing 4 to 5 films a year pretty much netted him the same amount of money that it did when he would do 1 film a year. You know what I mean? So he was taking on these kind of smaller roles because of that. And so anyway, in a long roundabout way, where I was going with that is now, if you look at them now, they don't really have anything on the horizon. The one that you mentioned with Isaac Florentine that Dolph did, he actually filmed that almost 4 years ago.
Right.
It's called Hellfire. It's finally seeing a release, but at the moment he doesn't really have anything on the docket. Van Damme, certainly he doesn't have anything on the docket because there's no money in it anymore, so who can really blame him? So Van Damme is charging for phone calls, doing it for the fans. He says he's doing it for the fans so he can talk to his fans at, a couple thousand a pop.
Right.
And then Dolph he's gone into the liquor business. And so he's selling his vodka, and he's really promoting that quite heavily. Interestingly, Jean-Claude had an Irish whiskey that he was selling and promoting a couple of years ago, but that looks to have gone by the wayside. So we don't see that anymore. So,
yeah, I mean, Dolph was joking that he's finally putting his chemical engineering degree to use, which is funny that he's I don't know how much input he's having into how the vodka is being made, but I guess either way. I mean, it's being made in Idaho with Idaho potatoes, so it does it looks like a good deal, but. To your point, I mean, Dolph had one come out this past year, Exit Protocol with Michael Jai White. I'd be curious to know how much he's in that. I mean, right now it's a $6 rental, so I'm not sure. It used to be in the past, like you said, when Dolph or Van Damme had a new movie come out. I mean, I remember Command Performance, seeing the trailers for that and being like, oh, I can't wait for Command Performance to come out. I can't wait to see that. There hasn't been a Dolph movie like that in forever, where it's just been like, oh, I'm seeing the trailers. I can't wait till this thing's out. I'm going to get it right away. So to your point too, I think they kind of know the writing's on the wall. They're going to make some of these movies from time to time because it keeps them relevant. It keeps them, they get some paycheck. I mean, Dolph's face on the cover or Van Damme's face on the tin, it still gets streams. But I mean, what these streams are worth, like We Die Young, each of us watching this I watched it on the Roku channel app. And so obviously there are commercials in there. I don't know how much money we made Lionsgate by watching the movie, but from Lionsgate standpoint, I guess it's like, hey, this movie that came out in 2019, it's not doing us anything now. Why don't we just put it on these different streamers and let it make some passive income for us? But that's different from saying, oh, I'm going to put money into something new now and see if it can make any kind of passive income. So yeah, what gets picked up by these streamers, what they pay for, and all of that, it's a whole kind of a nebulous thing. And like you said, there's just not a lot of money in it anymore.
Yeah, no, it really is. I don't want to say, well, yeah, no, it is very unfortunate that, there's not money in it, but then you look at the few projects that they have, you know what I mean? And, it's kind of a catch-22. You want them to, get good opportunities and good roles and good films out of it. But then you see the result that, or the final products, and you're kind of like, you know what I mean? I guess I don't blame them. You know what I mean? If I was walking into a job and I saw that, it was, being made, with, half the catering that I'm used to, and just crappy sets or whatever it may be compared to what I'm used to, well then yeah, of course you're not going to put in your best effort, and you're not going to really even care to come back and redub your lines. You know what I mean? Thankfully, I guess with this one, Van Damme didn't even have to worry about any kind of looping or dubbing, right? So
exactly. Well, and I think another piece of it too that we don't always know, like, I mean, like Dolph, for example, I wonder if the Florentine movie, he and Florentine are friends, and if it was like, I'm going to do him a favor and be in this movie, because again, I think that's what happened with We Die Young is another one that Van Damme was doing a favor to Moshe Diamant. I think that probably happens a lot with these two, where it's like, I'm friends with them. I mean, I think Section 8, I think the reason why Scott Adkins is in that, he also has a very small part in a movie called Lights Out. I think he's friends with the director, Christian Sesma. And so he's just like, yeah, I'll do 5 minutes in your movie for a small part. That's fine. I'll do one fight scene for you or whatever. So that's probably part of it too, that, these, and I mean, I know that was Daniel Zarilli when he was still with us, he passed away recently, but as a producer and director, he had a whole bunch of names that he could just pull from that, people that would be willing to be in his movies for him. And so it's again, it's like one of these things you got to go through IMDb and start seeing who that's connected with the actor in other things and say, okay, that's why they're there. That's why they're doing this movie.
Yeah. And I think, you mentioned already, but he did The Bouncer. Jean-Claude did The Bouncer the same year as this one. And then just last year he had The Gardener come out, which are both French productions. And so I almost kind of wonder with those particular films if, it's much easier to sell those particular films considering that's his native language. And, maybe he's a hotter, more popular commodity, overseas. And so it just makes sense to make an entirely French production type film. Last Mercenary was another one that was a French action comedy that he did, and so it's probably more profitable for them, and certainly easier and more profitable for him as well. But this particular film, We Die Young, was one of the weirdest experiences I've ever seen from our boy. But hey, it's at least he's going up to bat and trying something and taking a swing, and maybe it doesn't land, but it's at least something.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think one of the funny ironies about this movie too is that David Castaneda, he does Umbrella Academy right after this comes out. I think they actually come out the same year, but it would have been after he made this, and he blows up, and to some extent, I mean, he was in The Ballerina. He played Ana de Armas's character's father in the opening scene, and which I liked his character because he had his hair. They made him look like John Wick, so it was almost like I would say like a metaphorical passing of the torch with his character there. But he's doing all kinds of stuff now. Like he wouldn't do a movie like this anymore, David Castaneda. That you wouldn't be able to get him in one of these. But the irony is because he's playing the MS-13 guy, he's got tattoos all over his face, so they can't really use him to sell the movie now, because a lot of these movies will retroactively use a star who was in it originally for only a small part to try to sell it more, but they can't really do that now. So it's still only Van Damme that they can sell the movie with.
Yeah, no, I mean, and that was the big. I mean, I don't know if this would have even come off my radar or come onto my radar, excuse me, had it not been for his particular involvement. But like I said earlier, I remember when I first saw the trailer for this one, I remember thinking like, huh. And at the time, I didn't even really think that he was going to be a mute. I was just like, oh, it's Van Damme being Van Damme. He's going to have minimal dialogue. No, it was zero dialogue whatsoever. But he's really acting, and I don't want to say he's sleepwalking 100% in this particular film, but he's going for something, which is kind of cool. Interestingly, though, I almost kind of wonder if the producers and even Jean-Claude knew what they were working with, because other than that initial trailer when this was gearing up for release, neither the production company or Jean-Claude did any promotion for this particular film whatsoever. I remember with the Bouncer, Jean-Claude did do promotion for that one. With the Gardener, I think on his social medias, he was promoting that one, but this particular film, no, he did. He did nothing. This one was literally dumped, if I remember right, in the spring of 2019 with no fanfare promotion, nothing.
It feels like there are a few like that with him, right? So there's this one. I think Swelter was like that too, wasn't it? Just sort of like it's out there. There's or Welcome to. I guess he's not really in Welcome to the Jungle that much, but it's kind of a similar thing where it's just like, we're just dumping him out there. Well, yeah, we'll wrap things here. Thank you again, Sean, for coming on. This was a ton of fun. I mean, this movie is a very fascinating one to discuss. Like you said, it's it's an interesting one in Van Damme's catalog, and it just kind of worked out that you were watching it while I asked you about coming on, and figured let's make it happen. So so again, this is another good one. So great, thank you again for coming on. This was a ton of fun.
Thank you for the invite. Anytime we chat, Jean-Claude, I'm always game. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you as well. And thank you for listening. We'll be back soon. Bye, everyone.